the first hit on the machine. Let me ask you something. No one's dared to ask. Not your teachers. Not your boss. Not even yourself. But the question's been there, rotting quietly, somewhere in the back of your mind. What if everything you do every day makes no sense? I'm not talking about purpose, or destiny, or some grand spiritual mission. I mean something real, concrete, like your morning. You wake up, reach for your phone before your eyes even adjust, scroll without thinking, swipe without meaning. You stand up, you dress, you move, but it's not really you moving. It's the body obeying, while your soul floats behind the eyes, silently screaming. Tell me, have you ever felt out of sync, like you're playing a role in a life you didn't choose? That discomfort, it's not a bug. It's not burnout. It's not anxiety. It's a signal. Your essence, the wild, unscripted part of you, is trying to scream. But you've called it weakness. You've called it laziness. You've silenced it. And now, it whispers louder. In your chest, in your breath, in your quiet moments. Maybe the real problem isn't that you're broken. Maybe the problem is that you've been too obedient. And if something inside you has always felt out of place, that quiet resistance you keep brushing off, it's not dysfunction. It's not dysfunction. It's rebellion dressed as fatigue, defined by labor. Since childhood, you were told one thing: study hard, so one day you could become someone. But no one asked if you even had a say in becoming that someone. No one asked what it meant to be someone. They only handed you a blueprint, a script, a staircase made of grades, degrees, and job titles. From your first math test to your first resume, everything was preparation. For one thing, work, not meaning, not discovery, not selfhood, just work. As if labor were the natural destiny of every breathing human. As if your life only had value once it could be monetized. But let's step back. This wasn't always how life was. Before the clock ruled the day, before the factory defined the rhythm of life, there were no 8-hour shifts, no performance reviews, no career paths. The modern work ethic, this obsession with productivity, isn't human nature. It's historical design. It began during the Industrial Revolution, when people were taken from fields and villages, put into factories, and taught to see time not as life, but as labor. And from that moment on, you were no longer a being. You were a unit, measured by output, managed by efficiency, motivated by fear of falling behind. And here's the cruel twist. They didn't just make you work. They made you believe that working made you worthy. That if you didn't produce, you were nothing. That if you stopped moving, you were falling behind. That if you weren't useful, you didn't deserve to exist. So every pause feels like laziness. Every breath feels like debt. Every moment of stillness feels wrong. But here's the truth. They never told you. You weren't born to be a cog. You were born to burn, to blaze, to feel, to explore, to waste time in wonder, to dance without reason, to cry without cause, to rest without guilt. But instead, you've been taught to bind your identity to your productivity. You don't just do a job. You become it. I'm a lawyer. I'm a designer. I'm a doctor. And if that job disappears, what are you? What's left? The system doesn't just own your hours. It owns your self-concept. Because it knows the most efficient worker is the one who thinks their worth is tied to their output. But it was never true. You are not your LinkedIn bio. You are not your calendar. You are not your deliverables. You weren't born to validate a system. You were born to violate it by being fully alive. And that's the part they never wanted you to remember. Not because you're not good enough to work, but because you were never born to obey. The sin of being quiet. Look around. Everyone is running. Everyone is busy. Everyone is in a hurry. But ask them why. And silence follows. We've built a civilization that glorifies movement, but has forgotten direction. That celebrates effort, but fears pause. And so, we run. Faster, harder, longer, but never clearer. Because the moment we stop, we feel it. That tightness in the chest, that crawling anxiety, that whisper in the back of the mind that says, you should be doing something. And this is the trap. Rest has been rebranded as failure. Stillness feels like disobedience. Silence becomes unbearable. Not because it's wrong, but because we've been conditioned to fear it. From childhood, you were told busy is good, idle is dangerous. Only the productive deserve peace. And so now, when you finally get a break, you open your phone, not out of joy, but reflex, not to connect, but to numb the unbearable weight of pause, because even rest must now perform. Even your pause is parsed into scrolls, metrics, and feigned ease, dressed as leisure. You scroll, you refresh, you tap dopamine like a slot machine. Social media, notifications, streaks, progress bars. You're not just entertained, you're gamified. Even your downtime has become a performance, a simulation of pleasure, designed to keep your nervous system running at peak consumption. You don't scroll because it's restful. You scroll because stopping completely feels like death. The system doesn't need chains anymore. It just needs apps. You've been programmed to confuse stimulation with fulfillment. And now, even when you're alone, you're never truly alone. Your mind is crowded, buzzing, obligated to produce, even in rest. That's not leisure. That's servitude in disguise. And the cruelest part, you're the one enforcing it. Every time you feel guilty for not doing something useful, you are punishing your own biology. They've colonized not just your calendar, but your consciousness. Your attention has been outsourced. Your stillness has been pathologized. And somewhere along the way, you forgot how to just be, because to just be without progress, without profit, without proof feels forbidden. But here's the question no one asks anymore. Where do the immeasurable parts of you go? The parts that can't be tracked, monetized, or optimized. The part that watches sunsets for no reason. The part that listens to music and feels everything and nothing at once. That part used to be sacred. Now it's neglected, diminished, shamed. You don't rest. You cosplay rest under fluorescent lights and phantom guilt. You no longer escape the system. You entertain yourself inside its walls. But what happens to the part of you that doesn't respond to metrics? What happens to the piece of you that resists function, refuses calculation, and exists beyond usefulness? Because the more you ignore it, the louder it gets, and the more it aches. That ache is your sovereignty trying to return home. Waste as liberation. We've been told that everything must have a reason, a purpose, a result, that every action should be justified, every hour accounted for, every effort translated into something measurable. But Georges Bataille offered a different law, a hidden one, buried under centuries of industrial logic and moral discipline. He called it la dépense. Waste not as carelessness, but as revolt, not material waste, not excess for the sake of luxury, but existential waste, a sacred refusal to obey the logic of usefulness, to do something for no reason, to dance without choreography, to cry without reason, to laugh until your ribs ache and let it vanish, undocumented, because the most human things we do don't produce anything, and that is precisely what makes them holy. Ancient cultures understood this. The Greeks had the Dionysian mysteries, rituals of ecstatic frenzy, where people lost themselves to rhythm, wine, and chaos, not to build anything, not to learn anything, but to rupture the boundaries of the rational self. It wasn't a breakdown. It was a breakthrough. Medieval festivals, tribal ceremonies, sacred theater, all were spaces of deliberate excess, of energy spent wildly, beautifully, pointlessly, because somewhere deep inside, humans knew not everything sacred can be useful. But today, we've lost that. Art must now monetize. Joy must now be scheduled. Spirituality must now be optimized for productivity. We've turned the sacred into software, the altar into analytics, and so we forget it's not the outcome that liberates you. It's the act that cannot be captured. That's what Bataille fought for. A life that allows for intensity without purpose, emotion without transaction, pleasure without performance. Because what if the most radical thing you could do is nothing? What if sitting in stillness, gazing at the ceiling, or walking with no destination isn't a waste of time, but a return to being? You were not made to function like a machine. You weren't built to hold. You were made to spill like flame, like thunder, like grief. You were made to spend yourself, not save yourself, to experience, not accumulate. And so, the next time you do something that brings you joy, but offers no gain, no return, no miserable progress, don't apologize. Don't justify it. Don't try to turn it into content. Let it be what it is. Pure, useless, sacred. Because sometimes, to live without reason is the most honest thing you can do. And if you still think this is just a reaction to modern life, just wait. Because where we're going next, Bataille doesn't just challenge capitalism. He exposes a truth buried for thousands of years. Eroticism, breaking the boundary of the self. To understand Georges Bataille, you have to let go of the idea that eroticism is about sex. It isn't. Not in his world. Not in the one that exists beneath the surface of function and form. For Bataille, eroticism is a sacred force. A moment when the self, the boundary between I and other, dissolves. It's the tremor in the chest. The moment the mind loses grip and the self spills outward. The place where the structured, rational, productive ego lets go. In eroticism, nothing needs to be earned. There is no scoreboard, no hierarchy, no outcome to optimize. It's not about pleasure in the conventional sense. It's about transgression, about stepping outside the domain of utility, and entering a sacred field of intensity where you do not consume, you burn. In that moment, when two people abandon the idea of roles, goals, and usefulness, they stop being performers. They become experience itself. That's the paradox Bataille reveals. Real intimacy begins, not when we connect to serve a purpose, but when we connect to shatter one. But in today's world, connection has been reduced to a transaction. We no longer dissolve into others. We transact across curated masks. We don't reach for souls. We scan for leverage. Even relationships now orbit around function. What can this person give me? What do I gain? But what if you could love without reason? What if you could hold someone not to calm your loneliness, not to heal your wounds, but simply to dissolve together into something formless? That is eroticism. Not the cheap simulation we see online, not the commodified version we've been sold, but the sacred collapse of the borders between oneself and another. It's terrifying. It's overwhelming. It's profoundly human. Because for one fleeting moment, you are not a worker. You are not a task list. You are not a brand. You are a trembling being, alive at the edge of your own limits. Breath quick. Skin electric. Touching the mystery you spend your whole life trying to contain. And that mystery is freedom. Bataille called this the inner experience, a sacred state beyond knowledge, beyond doctrine, beyond social scripts. It is not safe. It is not efficient. It is not productive. But it is real. And when the boundary breaks, when the lines blur, when the mind stops calculating and the body begins to speak, you are no longer a productive self. You are the embodiment of something that cannot be measured. How to exit without escaping. Here's the truth. They don't teach you. You don't have to destroy the system. You don't need to burn it all down. Start a commune or disappear into the woods. You just have to stop feeding it. You don't rebel by running. You rebel by withdrawing your energy, by reclaiming your attention, by refusing to measure your life using standards you never consented to. Because the moment you stop believing that every hour must produce value, you've already stepped outside the machine. And that's the paradox. Freedom doesn't always look like revolution. Sometimes it looks like stillness. Sometimes it looks like turning off your phone and facing the quiet hum of yourself without armor and doing absolutely nothing without guilt. That's not laziness. That's the quiet return of your own kingdom. But this is where it gets deeper. Because Bataille didn't just speak of escape. He spoke of something even more radical, non-knowledge. A way of understanding that doesn't rely on logic, calculation, or proof. A kind of sacred awareness that comes not from solving contradictions, but from sitting inside them. We are taught that to know is to define, to label, to control. But some truths aren't meant to be grasped. They're meant to be entered, felt, endured. That's what inner experience means. It's not a method. It's a descent. And the way down isn't mapped. It's lived. You want to practice. Don't look for structure. Don't wait for permission. Try this. Sit alone in a room. Turn off every source of stimulation. No music. No scrolling. No plans. Just a chair. Your breath. And the roaring silence you've been outsourcing since you were 12. Or take a walk. With no destination. No step counter. No podcast. Just your body and the street, and whatever arises, it will feel stupid at first, useless, maybe even a little dangerous. But that's exactly the point. You are untangling yourself from a worldview that told you existence must always be justified. That time must always be filled. That meaning must always be produced. But meaning doesn't always come from doing more. Sometimes it comes from doing less with awareness. You don't need to run away from society. You just need to stop measuring yourself by metrics you never agreed to in the first place. You don't need to explain your rest. You don't need to monetize your joy. You don't need to perform your healing. You just need to choose, over and over again, to reclaim what has always been yours. Your time, your attention, your breath. Because the most radical exit is not external. It's the quiet decision to no longer live by a script that was never written with your soul in mind. The final declaration, I didn't come to serve. Let's not pretend you're still here by accident. You didn't stumble onto this. You're not watching this because you're bored, or curious, or lost in the algorithm. You're here because something inside you, something ancient, silent, and unbroken has started to stir, even if you can't name it, even if you've buried it beneath layers of deadlines, expectations, and polite compliance, There's a part of you that's done pretending, done functioning, done surviving Monday to Friday just to barely breathe on the weekend. And here's what most won't tell you. That part of you doesn't want answers. It doesn't need a system. It's not looking for another 5-step method to optimize your soul. It only wants one thing: space. Space to feel, to sit, to exist without being useful. And that is the most dangerous thing of all. Because the moment you stop producing, the system inside you begins to decompose. Not with fire, but with silence. One day, you won't look at the clock with panic. Another, you'll stop explaining why you didn't do something productive. And slowly, you'll begin to remember what it means to be. Not perform, not improve, not hustle. Just be. Because the real revolution isn't out there, tearing down institutions. It's in here, emptying yourself of the need to earn your right to exist. So, here's what I want you to do. Right now, go to the comments and write one sentence. I didn't come to serve. I came to feel. That's not a quote. That's a vow. A quiet act of resistance. A ritual. A mark that you were here, and something inside you cracked open. And if you want to take it further, do this. Turn off your phone. Close this tab. Sit in complete silence. No goal. No intention. No purpose. Just 5 minutes of stillness, of pure, useless being. And while you sit, say nothing, think nothing, prove nothing. Make it your silent oath each day. I will create space for the part of me that has no function, no value, no job to do, but is the very core of who I am. And if you can do that, even once you've already stepped into a threshold that most never even dare to see, a threshold that separates the obedient from the awake,